And we are up and running, and it is an amazing and bizarre kind of morning here in Chicago. We were, for the entire month of February, looking more and more like April, and now March has arrived, and in mid-month we're looking like January. So we've got snow and all kinds of temptations to believe that chaos rules. How are you this morning, Stephen?
I'm doing well. That's a good intro. Yeah, I think everything does seem to be amazing as well as bizarre. Good description.
And the thing is, it's, again, an outpicturing of the collective consciousness. And I find it fascinating to, observe what's going on in the environment around me, because to me, it indicates that people are ready to make a big change, but then all of a sudden they retrograde back into a space of, oh, this is going too fast. This is going too far. This is changing too much. And so then we get a blizzard, and everybody says, oh, well, we really didn't need this. And so, we start to progress again. But I think that a lot of people fail to get the innuendos that are given to us in all directions, from all events, from all individuals that we encounter. Because the world is a place of learning, and we can learn so much by observing.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that when we're going along this journey, it's really important to have that, quality of gentleness with ourselves too, because it's like when we try to push ourselves too hard, a lot of times we'll get lashed back, like the physics law from Newton, right? The equal and opposite reaction coming from every action. So yeah, being gentle with ourselves and not pushing,
Yes, and working on acceptance, not only of me, but thee and all of thine.
Yeah.
So, and that's really, I think, the keystone to spiritual growth and spiritual awakening is the acceptance of the fact that other people have their beliefs, and your obligation is not to believe their beliefs, but neither is it to contest their beliefs. To merely, look at it and realize, well, that's just what they believe, and that's fine with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and everyone gets to be right? I mean, because we are all really representatives of the same sonship here, the same Son of God. So in that, core identity, we're always right in our state of beingness, even though what we're saying might not be fully in accord with truth.
Exactly. It's always the show, the dog and pony show. Cirque du Soleil, and all of the amazing actors and actresses and animals, and the thundering herd. Anyway, we are working on chapter 13, the Guiltless World, which we can learn how to discover, which we can learn how to observe and experience as soon as we give up on our addiction to the world of attack and death and doom and destruction. And we're down to the cloud of guilt. So you want to start off this section, Stephen?
Yeah, sure thing. So section 9, the cloud of guilt. Guilt remains the only thing that hides the Father, for guilt is the attack upon his Son. The guilty always condemn, and having done so, they will still condemn, linking the future to the past as is the ego's law. Fidelity to this law lets no light in, for it demands fidelity to darkness and forbids awakening. The ego's laws are strict, and breaches are severely punished. Therefore, give no obedience to its laws, for they are laws of punishment, and those who follow them believe they are guilty, and so they must condemn. Between the future and the past, the laws of God must intervene, if you would free yourself. Atonement stands between them, like a lamp shining so brightly that the chain of darkness in which you bound yourself will disappear.
That's pretty potent, actually, when you stop and think about it. In the most condensed way, this is saying that you know, God remains the only thing that hides the Father, or guilt remains the only thing that hides the Father, for guilt is the attack upon his Son. So in the collective consciousness, you know, when Cain killed Abel, when Jesus got nailed to the cross, all of these events throughout history, all of the atrocities, all of the slaughter and blood slinging and dismembering that have occurred in this realm are part of the collective conscious. And we all feel that twinge of guilt, even though we avoid looking at it. But it's there. And it is the thing that causes us to slink away into the shadows when we are given the opportunity to encounter God or God's messengers, the Holy Spirit. So this cloud of guilt that resides within all of us is the one thing that keeps us from not only union with each other, but union with the absolute totality of divinity.
Mm. Yeah, and that's what's so great about becoming more aware of the guilt that we have stored up, because we have to make it aware. We have to make the darkness conscious, like Carl Jung said, in order to actually release it. And so, you know, most of the time we just keep that, you know, that guilt in our subconscious mind, and it's just sitting there, and it's like underneath this whole experience, and the whole time we're wondering like, something doesn't feel quite right about this whole thing, and it just, you can't really put your finger on it. But here, you know, the Course comes out and says, you know, this is what you got to look at first before you can be free.
Yes. And Jesus was obviously a confidant of Carl Jung, because in this next paragraph, he gives us an insight that is very much in parallel with Jungian psychology. It says, release from guilt is the ego's whole undoing. Make no one fearful, for his guilt is yours. And by obeying the ego's harsh commandments, you bring its condemnation on yourself, and you will not escape the punishment it offers those who obey it. The ego rewards fidelity to it with pain, for faith in it is pain. And faith can be rewarded only in terms of the belief in which the faith was placed. Faith makes the power of belief, and where it is invested determines its reward. For faith is always given what is treasured, and what is treasured is returned to you. So we do have a boomerang effect going on here with every incident where we load somebody else up with guilt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like that line where he says, make no one fearful, because when you make someone else fearful, you're making that guilt real. You're trying to validate the guilt. And so, you know, when you make someone else fearful, you're really doing that to yourself as well. You're making yourself fearful. So it's really, there's really no purpose that even can come from that. And it seemed like a really obvious thing. So oftentimes the Course does say things in really plain, like obvious language, but you know, just to hear that, I think is really powerful.
That's true. But there's also, you know, again, that process where when we first enter into discovering the Course, some of the language is such that we have a very strong sense of guilt as a result simply of reading the book. So you have to read and reread and study and observe and work your way through and arrive at a point where you're really looking at what is actually going on, what is actually happening, so that you can step away from guilt that is instilled from virtually every action that you take. I mean, you know, you go out and buy something at the corner grocery store, and you know, you underpay or you look for that bargain, and there's an unconscious amount of guilt for getting away with not paying the full price for it. I mean, it just is rife throughout the human experience, and we have to be able to observe the guilt, not suppress it, and then to release the guilt by turning it loose into the hands of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, totally. Oftentimes, my mind would, question just by reading the course. So like, what do I do with this? What am I supposed to be taking away from all of this, into my everyday life? And I feel like you really summed it up well, just like being that observer and being willing to look at it. And also realizing that the atonement, which Jesus says is the solution, is always present. Really, it's just waiting for you to accept it. It's like this light shining in our own self-imposed darkness, right? And if we just are willing to become aware of it, then that's the solution. It's an awareness thing, in other words, not an action thing.
Exactly. Yeah, it's being able to be the observer and to realize that ultimately none of this is, and none of it has ever been.
Yeah, that's the trump card, right?
That it is.
And so the next paragraph says, the world can give you only what you gave it. For being nothing but your own projection, it has no meaning apart from what you found in it and placed your faith in. Be faithful unto darkness, and you will not see, because your faith will be rewarded as you gave it. You will accept your treasure, and if you place your faith in the past, the future will be like it. Whatever you hold dear, you think is yours. The power of your valuing will make it so. Just again, capitalizing on the power of our own minds here, right? Just like, it's just telling us that basically whatever you believe you're going to see, whatever you have faith in seeing, is that will be your experience of reality, no matter how far away from actual truth it may be.
Right. And we do have to look at the foundation of belief, because a lot of belief is founded on fear. So if your belief in something that is fearful is strong enough, then you are setting yourself up to encounter that fear over and over and over again. So we do have to get to the point where we confront our own fear in order to change the nature of our belief.
Right, and that's an ever evolving process, right? Because we have those layers to us where, we are, oh, there's another fear that I didn't even realize what I was holding.
Yeah, they are infinite in fashion and form, it does seem.
Right.
And going to the next paragraph here, it says, atonement brings a re-evaluation of everything you cherish, for it is the means by which the Holy Spirit can separate the false and the true, which you have accepted into your mind without distinction. Therefore, you cannot value one without the other, and guilt has become as true for you as innocence. You do not believe the Son of God is guiltless because you see the past and see him not. When you condemn a brother, you are saying, I who was guilty chose to remain so. You have denied his freedom, and by so doing, you have denied the witness unto yours. You could as easily have freed him from the past and lifted from his mind the cloud of guilt that binds him to it, and in his freedom would have been your own. So again, we're getting a strong, suggestion here that in the most fundamental way, what goes around comes around, and whatever that we are projecting or believing about another that is based on referencing the past is ultimately going to come back and reside in our own nest. So we need to try and put as much attention on living in the present moment when we are interacting with people around us, and asking for the assistance of the Holy Spirit to see them as the Christ that they truly are.
Right. It's like nothing ever really wrong happens in the present moment, right? It's always because of our ideas about it. It's because of our judgments, which are inevitably based on either past experience or future anticipation. So it's not really ever the present that is causing any kind of harm to us.
Yeah, and more than, more than past experience, it's past fantasy, I think is probably a better way to look at it, because
Yeah.
the truth is, all of our relationships are fantasy experiences that we have scripted into this dream that we are experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah, that really sums it up. Yeah, and so I'll read this next paragraph. It says, "Lay not his guilt upon him, for his guilt lies in his secret thought that he has done this unto you. Would you then teach him he is right in his delusion? The idea that the guiltless Son of God can attack himself and make himself guilty is insane. In any form, in any one, believe this not, for sin and condemnation are the same, and the belief in one is faith in the other, calling for punishment instead of love. Nothing can justify insanity, and to call for punishment upon yourself must be insane." So it's that, like, that's kind of like, it feels like that being that parental role in a way, that we were talking about before, in terms of like kind of tempering that original urge or impulse to want to punish someone for their actions, but always keep like returning to that awareness of truth, that I'm really treating this person exactly how I treat myself. So I want to come to a place of forgiveness and being that awareness above, like rising above, right?
Absolutely,
That
yeah.
original impulse.
And it really gets us back to that recognition that all of the secret thoughts that we have is the source of all of our problems that we experience. The more transparent a person is, the more that they are able to think in terms that are not going to be offensive or aggressive or obnoxious or whatever to those around them. The more we live in that state of translucent love, the more that we reinforce the truth, not only for ourselves but for everyone around us. So when you're having those lustful thoughts that would get you slapped upside the head, you might want to start looking at those and saying, my meaningless thoughts are creating a meaningless world here for me.
Yeah, and then you start to see the silliness of all of it, and you can probably start to laugh at it a little bit there.
It does become easier to see the humor in it rather than to feel the sting and bite of it.
Right.
And going on to this next paragraph, it says, "See no one then as guilty, and you will affirm the truth of guiltlessness unto yourself. In every condemnation that you offer the Son of God lies the conviction of your own guilt. If you would have the Holy Spirit make you free of it, accept his offer of atonement for all your brothers, for so you learn that it is true for you. Remember always that it is impossible to condemn the Son of God in part. Those whom you see as guilty become the witness to guilt in you, and you will see it there, for it is there until it is undone. Guilt is always in your mind, which has condemned itself." That's very salient there. Guilt is always in your mind, which has condemned itself. Project it not, for while you do, it cannot be undone. With everyone whom you release from guilt, great is a joy in heaven, for the witnesses to your fatherhood rejoice. So, this projection onto those around us is the thing that is really destroying us in many, many ways.
Yeah, in a way, I see the guilt that comes in our mind. It kind of sounds like he's talking about a computer virus almost. Something, this thought has entered our mind, and it's sort of like polluted our mind into thinking we're guilty. And it's like, it's just this random idea. It doesn't have any actual source that you could validate. And I think that when we follow A Course in Miracles, we start to like see that truth. We start to like, it's like seeking out a source for the guilt, and you never find it there, because there really isn't one.
Right. Ultimately, it's all based on fantasy and illusion.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'm feeling immensely guilty right now for not having my phone closer and having having all of those rings show up in our video. So my apologies, and I hope you all will release me from my guilt as I release you.
Yes, we will practice some forgiveness there for you. Because there's nothing to forgive, really. It's okay.
That is true.
So we are at guilt makes you blind. So I will read that part. That guilt makes you blind. For while you see one spot of guilt within you, you will not see the light. And by projecting it, the world seems dark and shrouded in your guilt. You throw a dark veil over it, and you cannot see it because you cannot look within. You are afraid of what you see. You are afraid of what you would see there, but it is not there. The thing you fear is gone. If you would look within, you would see only the atonement, shining in quiet and in peace upon the altar to your Father. So what we're looking for in terms of the guilt is actually already gone. It's already been resolved, because the whole idea of all this is that, like in time, it happened long ago, and then in reality, it didn't happen at all. There's no reason for guilt. And so when we seek it out, we try to find it in our mind, we can't find it because it's already gone. So it's just a story we're believing about it that keeps it there.
Yes, and we do have to, acknowledge how that resolution came about, which was that one person accepted the atonement in its entirety. That was Jesus. And as a result of that act, all of the illusion was turned into an even greater illusion, because it was nothingnized. It was turned into nothingness as a result of not the crucifixion, but the magnificence of the resurrection. As we come up on Easter here, we're getting closer to that period of lilies, where the beauty of the lilies, the growth, the regeneration, the opening is all about the whole story of Easter. And if you get lost in the death and doom and blood and all of that, then you're missing the picture. You're missing the point of this particular period of the year.
And it's about our eternal innocence as well, right, Chris? I mean, to say, really the opposite of the guilt is our innocence, which is the truth of what we are.
Exactly. It's giving us that prod in that direction to realize that not only did nothing ever happen, but we were never in fact separate from the source of whom we are.
Right. And so we remain in that state of ever-present love and extending love with God, because that's what we are created to be.
Yes, we're just having a temporary, difficult dream that is trying to counter the truth, but of course it has no power to do so.
Right.
Looking at the last paragraph here, it says, "Do not be afraid to look within. The ego tells you all is black with guilt within you, and bids you not to look. Instead, it bids you look upon your brothers and see the guilt in them. Yet this you cannot do without remaining blind. For those who see their brothers in the dark, and guilty in the dark in which they shroud them, are too afraid to look upon the light within. Within you is not what you believe is there, and what you put your faith in. Within you is the holy sign of perfect faith your Father has in you. He does not value you as you do. He knows himself and knows the truth in you." That's a very powerful line right there. He knows himself and knows the truth in you. The implication being that you are not only one with God, but you are God. He knows there is no difference, for he knows not of differences. Can you see guilt where God knows there is perfect innocence? You can deny his knowledge, but you cannot change it. Look then upon the light he placed within you, and learn that what you feared was there has been replaced with love. So that gives us a beautiful outcome.
Right. And that's like showing us too that when we have those ideas about someone where like, you know, oh, like whether it's about ourselves or someone else, that they have darkness in them, right? Like, or that they have some sort of like demonic possession or evil or something like that, then like the reality is that like you cut even deeper than that layer. And the truth is that they are light, that they are love, and that this any kind of darkness you're seeing is illusory.
Well, not
So,
only an illusion, but also a desire to avoid looking at the darkness within yourself.
right.
You know, and that's the way that we end up getting caught in the trap, is while we're projecting it onto those around us. The truth is, we're living in this state of ongoing fear of having to confront it within ourselves.
Mm.
And the moment we are able to stop that little circle of thought, as soon as we can still the mind long enough to make a breakthrough into that place of light, then we discover that, oh, I'm not who I thought I was. Look at what I am.
I'm not as awful as I thought I was, right?
Yes, I am a celestial being, and my God, my perfection is astonishing. So that's what we're all aspiring to. But you've got to extend the grace to everyone around you and realize that you want that not only for yourself, but for everybody else you encounter in this world.
Yeah, I find comfort in knowing that, you know, there's really no end to the amount of appreciation we can have for our true self, for the true light that we are. I mean, there's an infinite amount. It's ever extending.
Yes, but it is the impersonal self. Again, once you start to get even a little tiny tinge of the ego involved there, then it starts to pollute the water, you know, and so we have to keep that purity by being the impersonal self, by not being the ego, and aligning ourselves with the Christ that is our truth.
Right, because the ego wants to put it in a little box, right, and say that this is me. That this is little me, and that's how great I am. And as soon as you can start to make something of it with your rational mind, you know, then that's when you're not really fully experiencing it, right?
Right. That's when it's become a projection, and again, you know, then you start falling into defensiveness. Well, I'm so perfect, and everybody else around me is slightly bent or warped or broken. So, but I am munificent, so I will accept them as they are.
Right, totally. And so releasing those delusions and bring it back to ourselves so we can release it.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, Stephen, next week we get to look at chapter 10, which is the release from guilt. And this looks like it's going to be very, very important as we're moving in on Easter. We're getting closer and closer to that event in celebration, not of the death, but of the resurrection, the truth of who Jesus was.
I'm sorry, Chris. Chapter 10 says the idols of sickness. Which one are you looking at?
Chapter 10.
I'm sorry, section 10 you meant. Okay.
Section 10, yes.
Of chapter 13. Cool. Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great.
Yes, we will be given the keys to the kingdom next week, so you can't miss this next episode.
Yes.
You've got to join us in 1 week for the answer to all of this conundrum.
Absolutely. Sounds great. So I'll see you next week then, Chris.
Have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Talk to you then. Bye.
Okay, bye.